shit, everyone. Quiet on the shit. Quiet on the shit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Evo Productions. If you watched our last video, then you saw all of our lovely mechanics except for magic. So this video is going to be just about all things magic in the world. So Jay, everyone has their own way of explaining how magic works in their world. What is yours?
Do you want the long version or the really long version?
The one that will explain it to the viewers.
Oh, man. I mean, at its core, magic is a manifestation of your will, you know. In Synestria, it's based around the concept of manipulating mana, which is a force that exists in the world. There are many theories on how this force came to be, and all that's really understood and has been determined is that it is not necessarily finite, but the space which it covers is finite. It essentially spreads out like a field over a large part of the known universe, but outside of that, it's theorized that magic would be basically impossible to use.
So would it be equivalent to like something on Earth like gravity or oxygen, where once you go into space, those things sort of cease to exist? I guess gravity doesn't cease to exist.
Well, yeah, gravity's complicated. We still don't really understand how that works. But yeah, basically, it literally is not present beyond what they call the web. The web is essentially the mass within which all of magic happens. And so outside of that, where that doesn't exist, it is theorized that magic doesn't happen.
Okay. Rios, do you have any thoughts on how magic works? Just like the base components, or any opinions or speculations?
I think that it's one of those things that it's all around you, you know? It's in all living things, it's like this energy that protrudes throughout the world, you know?
Very spiritual. Okay, so now that you guys kind of have a base understanding of what magic is, how it works, normally we would talk to you about the very specifics of it, but it would be easier explained if you just looked at the note we created for it. Essentially, like the Forgotten Realms lore, there are different types of magic. We call them the spheres of magic. And these two worked really, really hard on specifying them and even broke them down into subcategories. So there is your overall category, and then there's like little categories underneath it. Because in Synestria, magic is heavily sanctioned. There are lots of laws and permits and just a lot of bureaucracy you have to go through, which we will be talking about in more detail. Essentially, that means that they had to specify down to the letter who each mage is, what they practice, what that entails, so that no one oversteps their bounds or does something that they're not supposed to. Speaking of which, the best example of that would be animancy and necromancy. So to understand why there are so many sanctions and laws and why everyone's so real specific about the spheres of magic and what you can practice, you'll need to understand animancy first to understand necromancy in the world. So I'm going to pass it to Rio so he can explain animancy to you guys.
So animancy was something that originated a long, long time ago when there was a man named Saffron, who, very, very evil, twisted man, performed a ritual, you know. I'm not going to go too much in detail. You can find that out by reading the book, you know. And he performed this ritual, went in there, did his little thing, and afterwards, animancy was born. And what animancy looks like, it's kind of taking that natural flow of life and mana and twisting it, making it into something else. Like, for example, what you could do with it is take a plant and pull its energy away, its life force, transfer it into another being, and then that life force is now in them. It can be used for healing, things of that nature. It can also be used, differently. You can manipulate your own by reaching within, pulling from your soul and manifesting that into something akin to like a blade or, something like that. Sealing, that's just popped in my head. Sealing is something where you kind of take all of that energy and use it against someone. You kind of trap it, right? And it's almost akin kind of to a curse, but it's not quite there. You'll learn more about curses, the longer we go with this stuff. You'll see there's a great class that was recently made called the Witch class that really expounds upon what a curse can do and what it means in our world. You should definitely check that out. But yeah, this is kind of akin to that with, $5 too on Patreon. It's a seal, it traps the people in there, makes sure that they can't burst out. Go for it.
The sealing works like binding. It's basically you can tether two items. So if you wanted to tether a specific sword to you, you could summon it, or in the more traditional sense that it's been used by the gods mostly, because the one correction I will say is that Sephiroth didn't necessarily create it. He just changed it in a very fundamental way. He created a new way to use it that made it evil. Before then, it was the domain of the gods. But basically, you can tether a specific entity to a specific place, and if you're strong enough, like a god, then that thing cannot leave.
The last part that I want to get into with animancy is it's not really something that is practiced legally nowadays in where we are. I think even in Second Age, I know in the books, which is in Third Age, it's, the age after this one, 1, 2, 3. It's still not legal, both Second and Third Age. But the only part of it that is gifting magic. There's these people in the world called gifters. They take that part of animancy that's the most pure, in a sense, where they're able to take their own mana or other mana, like from plants and stuff, and gift it to someone else. In doing so, they can heal. So that's kind of our answer to, what a cleric would usually be if you were looking at D&D or something. That's the best thing that I can pull from, where they take, from their gods and then they give, this healing magic. Our answer is not that straightforward. We don't do that. There's no healing energy from gods or anything, because all the gods are dead. Instead, we have the gifters. They just pull from other life forms or themselves. In doing that, though, and pulling from themselves, they actually take a couple years off their life, too. So it's a really honorable thing in the world to be a gifter, because you could, at any point, you could just heal someone and end up dying, taking enough years off your life. So it's a really big deal. But yeah, that's the only official sanctioned thing in Synestria.
Now that you guys know about animancy and the exceptions allowed for it, I'm going to pass it to Jay so he can tell you about necromancy and the sort of exceptions allowed for it.
Unlimited power.
Basically, so the inverse, converse, reverse, converse, regardless, the opposite side of the spectrum from animancy. While animancy is fundamentally manipulating the soul using positive energies in hopes of doing positive things, enhancing the entity or transferring the energy. Necromancy is using negative energies to debilitate or weaken the soul, or to sort of gain dominion over a soul or a soul's vessel, i.e. like a corpse. And it's strangely named because it's not necessarily the manipulation of death. It goes a lot more beyond that. As far as the specific applications go, there are reavers, who basically are like dark gifters. Rather than giving their own life essence or the life essence of things that they are sanctioned to give to others, they instead take the essence from others to empower themselves or their allies. And then there are also maestros who basically use their dark energy to gain dominion over others' souls. And it's strange because it's not like fiction magic or any sort of illusion that would like trick your mind into believing they're your friend. It's not a charm or anything like that. They literally gain dominion over the physical form and the soul of the creature and begin to control them like a puppet. And then there's witches. They use hexes and curses, and essentially they instill dark energy into an object or a target in order to cause different effects. They typically, the most common effects that you'll see are something along the line of various diseases, those sorts of like side effects and stuff. So they can do things like cause the feeling of being poisoned, or like cause blisters and warts to grow or something like that. All sorts of stuff like that. But they can also, more skilled witches can create curses that curse things even as far as your fate within the next couple of minutes. It can't be, super far down the line unless they're like a god or something. But in most cases, it could be something along the lines of like you're more likely to, lose your balance or lose some strength, like immediately just feel this like rush of fatigue or something like that. So it just depends on who you're dealing with that. And then in regards to the sanctioned versions of necromancy, so she's a necromancer. That's, if you guys haven't caught on yet, that's what she is. She's very proud of it. But she's not actually a necromancer. That's the thing, and neither of you are. Well, you're kind of a necromancer. You're a little bit darker, but you are sanctioned. And so essentially when you're dealing with animancy and necromancy, when it comes to sanctions, it's actually referred to as anacana and necrocana. And essentially what they are the studies of the sanctioned things. So like gifters are anaconists rather than animancers. And she is a necroconist who, is capable of doing things like raising corpses, but without adding soul manipulation to the mix. So it's a little bit more, can we say wholesome?
I mean, yeah, because I only raise corpses. Okay, so a little bit preemptive right now, but Alienor is half Stilt's guardian, and if you guys remember from our races video, Stilt's guardians have this cultural norm of raising skeletons to be guards and servants and wards and all kinds of things. They use their dead, like even after the person's died, and they don't manipulate the soul most of the time. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but the general culture is that you continue to use the corpse until there's nothing left. And so she is essentially a necroconist. She does exactly that. What Stilt's Guardians do normally in Stiltsguard, she does in Gryffindale. And she just raises skeletons for people to use as servants or guards or wards or whatever they need a skeleton thing for. And the great thing about it is you're not risking someone's... But before the ghost entered the room... Basically, it's just very convenient because you're not risking someone's life. You're just using a corpse that's already died. And you're not breaking any laws because, like Jay said, you're not using their soul. It's just a corpse.
For those of you that were wondering why I was looking at her hand, maybe, I looked at a ring and I thought that it was a brain for a second, but when at closer inspection, it's actually just a little tree. It really took me off guard, sorry, but... That's not the point I was trying to make, but Alienor is the character that she's playing, just for context, because we went in there and you're like, Alienor, and I was like, oh, that's the character that you're playing. So yeah, in regards to my character, I don't know what I'm playing. He's just a mysterious man. We're not going to go into detail. It has nothing to do with necromancy. I don't know why my friend here name dropped him like that, because nothing spooky, nothing weird about my guy, just completely normal. All he wants to do is sell shoes, alright? That's it. Cool.
Alright, we'll have our prologue videos here in a few weeks. But for now, we need to keep talking about magic. So, once you look at the spheres of magic, it'll tell you what sanctions people can get, stuff like that. And once someone is a sanctioned mage, they can do all kinds of stuff. They can make spells, craft items, and we actually have a system for that in Synestria. So, which one of you wants to explain that system? Why don't you explain crafting spells and you explain crafting items?
So when it comes to magic crafting, this thing came to me when I was playing D&D back in the day, and it was just constantly in my mind of like, how did all this happen? Like, how did a wizard determine that a fireball was a thing? Like, there's no precedent for that, you know? There's no creature that does that in the world, or any sort of like normal phenomena that creates a massive ball of fire that's hurled and explodes. So like, where did that all come up from? And then beyond that, how does that like really become something that someone can do? And even further than that, why would it not be possible to manipulate that in some way? And I know that sorcerers and stuff can do their own thing, but like meta magic is a very specific case that I think doesn't really apply. I'm more talking about the initial creation of a spell. So I spent some time racking the anime side of my brain really hard to try and figure out sort of how this would work in my mind as far as a power system goes. And I think I've got something that works pretty well. So first and foremost, I believe this is one of the free documents that we will, that's free. If you go to our Patreon, we'll leave a link in the description down below, and you guys can click on that. It'll take you there, and you can see the whole thing sort of explained out. But as just a basic explanation, there are 3 parts to it, and each part that you add to this ritual, essentially, modifies a different part of the spell. So you can modify the vehicle by which the spell gets there. So if it's like a touch spell, a self spell you cast on yourself, a spell that's launched as like an attack, or a spell that's made as a like requires a save of some kind, or just a spell that's kind of just cast initially. That's one part of it. And then there's sort of a catalyst which determines kind of the actual power source of the spell. So like if you're wanting it to be a spell that's cast really quickly, you might use something like like a rabbit's foot. Or if you're wanting it to be a spell that's got like a very large area of effect, you might try to conduct the ritual in like a large open field or something. And then the last part of it is the actual, basically the thing that the spell will imprint off of. As an example, if you've been watching Critical Role, their character, Caleb, has just created a spell that allows him to essentially, spoilers, but manifest a web of fire that like spreads out fire in all different directions, and he uses a little kind of piece of twine to make like a kind of cat's cradle in order to cast it. Well, basically that would be kind of the example of how this would work. You could use some sort of very intricate sort of web-shaped kind of weaving that's been done, or maybe like a giant ritual painting of like a web-shaped kind of thing, and use that as sort of your imprint to sort of basically show the magic what form you're wanting it to take. And then on top of that, the last thing is kind of the you can add stuff to it. So if you want to take like a really powerful magic item that already exists, or if you're like a dark wizard and want to frickin' use a living being as your catalyst, whatever, you can basically find something that has some sort of innate magic to it or is just alive, and use that to fuel the spell. And that is essentially how the spell increases in power. So like if you're wanting to create a first level spell, you're probably not going to need much of anything to do that. But if you're wanting to create like a 5th or a 6th level spell, you might have to have, like a very rare item, or even 2, to sacrifice basically in order to manifest the spell. And as I said, all the specifics are in the whole document, and it goes into a lot more detail and gives an actual example. But yeah, is there anything else you want to know about spell creation?
No, that covers it. So Rios, how would you go about creating a magic item?
Well, first of all, thank you for the spoilers for Critical Role. So the origins of magic items. So from what I understand, whenever me and Jalen over there created this, for a long time, there actually was no solid way to make a magic item. It was usually just something born, in the midst of areas with really high magic energy, mana, So I think, for example, like, let's say there was a war fought, it was a very intense war with spells being slung around here and there. There would be, from that, maybe a lot of people died, they left a really huge imprint. From that, there might be a single sword that slayed multiple people and got a lot of mana here and there on it. And from that, we usually be born a magic item. It's not something that would just happen every time, but, just on occasion would happen, and that's how it was usually made. No one really understood the science of it or anything, but usually the weapons born from that were really, really, really strong. But I guess people find ways to imitate it, usually through intuition, stuff like that. They find ways to perhaps trap a spell or imitate a spell. It's a real small scale, but they can't just like take a sword and say, oh yes, this thing's going to have the ability to have you see into the future. It's nothing major like that. It's usually just something that's like an extension, It's usually like, oh, this thing, you have it and you can, run faster, or you could maybe teleport a certain distance, or perhaps cast a spell through this, or have your spell or your sword leave you, return to you, But it's nothing crazy, like the items of old, but it's, like I said, like an imitation of that, of the concept. So that's kind of what a magic item is in this world. There's different ways to go about, making it, but that's kind of what people have come to understand nowadays.
So basically the initial ones that were created back in the day, and still can be, but are much less frequent now, are called relics, and they're essentially manifested in, like he said, by events. And then anything that's created today isn't, innately magical, but like he said, can use magic as sort of a fuel to it. And that's considered a type of magical technology or magitech, and some people call them magic items, but in most cases, there's a very clear distinction between something that's like a real, innately magic, like created from crazy stuff happening kind of item, being a relic, and then, anything else, basically, that usually has a lot less power to it. And the former, the relics, are typically not sanctioned at all. The only people who are going to get sanctions for those are very powerful people, like politically powerful, not necessarily like physically powerful or magically so, and people who have like proven themselves to need it or like use it well. So like a tenured professor at a magic school or something like that. But then magitech is very common and is being created even more. The creation of it is increasing all the time, and moving through Second Age, it just continues to grow and grow. And so you start seeing them all over the place, and it becomes a bit of a point of contention, where all of a sudden we're starting to see magic, properties being passed out to people who don't have sanctions, and it becomes kind of a conversation to have.
I think another thing that I want to note as to why you don't really see relics, with really powerful nature be born anymore. I think it's because it's a different time now. Back then, there was a time where gods were alive, people were fighting because of that, or, it was a different world. Mana and things of that nature looked different. That's why things were able to be born into it that were really powerful, as a result of the world around them. It's not to say that still can't happen. It can. It just doesn't happen often because you don't see big magical wars being waged anymore, And even if they do, it's different, Like before, there were these gods that were alive. They had all this power that probably sunk into the world in some shape or form. They probably had some effect on it. And they're no longer a thing. World looks different, and that's why you don't really see relics anymore. But it's not to say it can't happen, like I said. We just have yet to see it.
Basically, yeah, it used to be a time where you were fighting to survive, and crazy powerful monsters were roaming around, and there wasn't really anyone to stop them. But as time advanced, that was ages and ages ago. As time advanced, you built cities, you built walls, you built real structures that can protect you, including factions that can protect you, like monster hunters and stuff like that. And now it's just a lot less common to see huge magic battles.
Okay, so last thing about magic items. In traditional Forgotten Realms lore, certain magic items require attunement slots. In Synestria, it's similar, but just a little bit different. Relics, if you remember those old items that were created out of, crazy events, those require attunement slots. But Magitech does not. The new stuff people are creating nowadays doesn't require an attunement slot. And to just give you a few examples, something equivalent to a common and uncommon item would be 1 attunement slot. Something that's rare would be 2. A very rare would be 3. And that's about all the attunement slots casters or really just any normal person gets. But there are certain things that are called artifacts that require 4 attunement slots. How do you get those? I don't know. He won't tell me. And you guys will find out in Gryffindor why I need that. But moving on, a caster needs both the knowledge of how to create a spell and the knowledge of how to create an item to create something so much better than both of those things, and that is an Eidolon. Eidolons in our world are almost, you can attribute them to familiars, but so much more powerful. To give you an example, Alienor has an Eidolon named Bones. And there are 3 tiers of Eidolon, 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the most powerful. And depending on which tier Eidolon you have, that tells you how many attunement slots they take. So if you have a tier 1, it takes up 1 attunement slot. And that means that it's equivalent to an uncommon or common magic item. So it's not going to be much more powerful than those things. So Bones would be equivalent to a rare item. And he takes up 2 attunement slots out of Alienor's 3. The reason you need to know how to create a spell and an item is because when I say create an Eidolon, it literally is a creation ritual, which is available on our Patreon if you go check that out in the link below. You need an equivalent item to the power of Eidolon you're creating. And you need to be able to cast a spell to energize this ritual to be what you want. The document explains it in much more detail, but to give you guys a brief overview, you can use anything to create an Eidolon. If you want to use the Flaming Sphere spell to create a Flaming Sphere Eidolon, you can do that. And Eidolons aren't just familiars. It's not just like, you use a pseudo dragon or a fairy or something like that. It's much more complex. You actually get to build your Eidolon from the ground up like a character, and there is the system in the document for how to do that. And Eidolons also have specific assigned almost personalities that we gave them, almost like their own class. There's aggressor, protector, servant, unseen, armor. There's all kinds of different Eidolons you can create, and you can create all of them at different tiers. So for example, Bones is a 2nd tier protector Eidolon. So he's not going to be like a 1st level aggressor Eidolon. He's completely different. On top of that, I made him a skeleton, which is also going to give him different benefits than if I made him out of a flaming sphere. So for more information on Eidolons and how they're created and what they can actually do, you can check out the document. It's gonna be in our Patreon, so you're gonna want to go to our Patreon page, and that will be in the description below, along with everything else we've talked about in this video, including Spheres of Magic, which is free, and that will be posted on our Patreon and linked down below. And then the sanctions, which I believe are in the Spheres of Magic document, along with spell crafting and magic item crafting, which I believe are already in the cheat sheet that is for free for you guys as well. But if not, I will link those down below too. Everything will be down there below the table. And yeah, I mean, really the only thing left that we have to tell you guys about is just that we're gonna be flavoring the spells in a completely different way. And I'll actually just throw it to them to talk about the unique things they would like us to do with spells and describing them in game for you.
And just, it was really funny to me how Emily was telling you where to go get the stuff on the drive. So I would just like to say, yeah, you can just visit us at www.pleasedonatetourpatreon.com. that is where you'll find all Evo properties and Evo things, is again at www.joinourpatreon.com. If you can, if you want to. I mean, we don't really ask for much, you know. We eat ramen on a daily basis, so yeah, we really don't ask for much. I mean, that's really high. I mean, even $1 will get you a long way, you know. We're really struggling here, so please help.
All right. So Jay, would you like to just talk to them about how you want to flavor spells and change things? And
All right. Any caster can manipulate on a base level something like if they want to try to cast shield on an ally, they could do that. It's not necessarily that you're going to just be able to cast your normal prepared shield spell on an ally, but if you wanted to use the spell creation ritual to create a spell that would allow you to do that, you could. Or if, say, you know the Firebolt spell and you want to be able to make it do cold damage or winter damage in our world, you could go in and do, you know, maybe like a 4-hour ritual with a couple, you know, with like a rare item that has cold properties and change the property of that spell. Not that you could never cast the Firebolt spell again either. It would just give you access to the ability to cast it as a cold spell. In addition, the only other thing that I really want to talk about in regards to flavoring, and these guys might have something else to say, is that in Synestria, because it is not the Forgotten Realms, we will not be using the Forgotten Realms specific spells in the sense of something like Bigby's Hand or Mordenkainen spells or, you know, any of those sorts of spells, Odaluk. Instead, what we'll be doing, while the spells do still exist in some capacity, we will have spells that use names that would fit our lore. And they still may have the same sort of effect, but they also might be different. For example, Bigby's Hand in the world, while it could be a force-based, you know, giant hand-looking, like normal human hand-looking thing, in our world it's more commonly, because it was created originally this way in Synestria, a big, scary-looking, black, dark energy demon hand that deals necrotic damage because it was created by the followers of Kerr. So it's just a matter of making things make sense in our world and our lore without having to justify something like why, you know, I think it's the Big Seven wizards, you know, exist, or the Circle of Seven, I think they're called, in you know, in our world, because they don't.
Another note that I wanted to make for those, you know, purists out there, we're doing a lot of changes. It's not for the sake of just being like, oh, we think the game's garbage, so we want to do that. No. The reason why I believe we're doing a lot of these changes and stuff is because I think it, you know, this world is a world that's based around a book that me and him, you know, created. And I think to us, 5e, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And like Gary Gygax said, you know, it's, you know, the rules are there. I'm not going to completely quote him. I can't quote the man, but
I was excited for a second.
Yeah, no. But he did say, you know, along the lines of like, you know, whatever's there is there, but do as you will with it. You know, like, you know, the games, we're all sitting around a table, you know, with our imaginations. Like, you know,
if the players want to play a dragon, let them.
Yeah, if the players want to play a dragon, let them. But what I was wanting to say is, to us, we felt like a lot of the changes that we're making are, they do justice to what we see that world as. A lot of the stuff that we're doing, you know, that's pretty much, we think that if we're going to be telling a story that's within the world through D&D, we want to be able to perfectly represent that. And, you know, by doing that, you know, we're taking some of the limitations that D&D has and, you know, just changing it. You know, so I just wanted to get that point out there so people weren't like, oh, you cocky fucks, look at you, you're changing everything. No, we're doing what we feel is best for the storytelling that we want to tell in the world. So just thought I'd throw that out there, you know.
Yeah, that sentiment is definitely echoed on this side of the table as well.
okay, so with all that said, I believe that concludes Magic for Synestria. We will see you next week when we berate this DM about Gryffindale and what he has in store for us. Bye, guys.